Good morning. My name is Marcy Stromgren, and you've joined us viewing Just the Facts this morning. I have in the studio with me my guest, Loren Martell. He's running for the 709 school district, and I'd like to welcome you, Martell.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
And I would like you now to tell the viewers, first of all, a little bit about yourself. I know you from, I don't know how many years ago now, at least 8.5 when we were working on the school district, and I monitored for most of those years. But you continued to monitor, and you've been writing for the Reader. But you have some insights that I'd like you to share with the viewers about why are you running for the school district?
Well, I think there's some things we can build on here. It's not all negative. We've got a good staff in place. There's been a big turnover in staff in recent years, and we've got great teachers in the classrooms overall, and some great administrators, very dedicated, very innovative, very energetic. And I think if we can give them the resources that they need, they could fly here. But we have some serious fiscal issues with District 709, and I think I bring some skills to the table and some knowledge to the table that would help solve some of those problems.
When you talk about your skills, besides your writing skill, which I think you enumerate on what goes on in the meetings very clearly from the articles I read in the Reader, you seem to have a grasp of the financial situation. How is it that you, or what do you feel you can bring to the table in that regard because of our fiscal situation that we have?
Well, again, I think that we have to move more quickly. We've got a board that has not been fiscally active enough. The board is responsible for fiscal control. The superintendent is responsible for administrative control. And I just think we need a more proactive board. And there's some things that everybody's aware of. We do have a lot of value sitting out there with vacant properties. I think we need to get more active about moving those properties. I think that, I know we've had a number of offers, but I think that we could close some deals fairly quickly if we had a change in the board, and that would bring a lot of money in to help quickly deal with some of our fiscal issues. There's a few other things as well that I think we could do with a more proactive board, if you want me to go on.
Yes, such as?
Well, again, I think the board should have some fiscal priorities of its own. And in every budget cycle, we do invest. We've made investments here, well over $1 million. Even when we're in deficit, we do make investments. And I want to say, first of all, that I think staff has done a good job in recent years. They've opened up the process more. They've gone over it more line by line, openly, and I commend them for that. And overall, I think they've done a good job, and it's a hard job. They come in there year after year and have to cut. But I do think that the board itself should have some priorities, and one priority that I would have is to establish a grant writing position. We did have a position years ago when Mr. Dixon came to town. He did eliminate that position when he was going after the budget there and effectively rating the budget. They're writing the grants ad hoc in the departments right now. And I think they're doing a yeoman job considering the fact that they don't have the time or expertise. But, if you look at the budget, again, well over $1 million of investments here. I could go through it line by line where I could nick a little bit from this and that line, and I think I could have put $80,000 together. $80,000 less than most of the administrators are making, I think would get us a good grant writer. And I think we could, double the grant money that we're bringing in. When I was out knocking on doors in the last election cycle, I ran into a UMD professor who was quite knowledgeable about school district finance. And he told me I was absolutely correct. He said, there's a lot of money out there, federal money particularly, to help with things like the achievement gap, but you really have to get your act together and go after it. And I think, we should have a grant writing team together, and I think if we had 2 grant writers and a staff person, we could maybe triple or quadruple that money. And we just have to get more proactive. about finding money without just going to the tax base. And I think it's, that is your responsibility as a taxpayer to protect the taxpayers. And as a board member, I meant to say to protect the taxpayers and make sure that you're bringing in revenue as much as you can to help to solve this problem without just constantly raising the levy. We may have to go there. We may have to ask the public at some point because they're in such dire shape fiscally, but I want to do everything I can to find money some other way first.
Do you think that by finding that money through grant writing, that we would eliminate some of the bleed out that's running to other school districts? Because we're losing a lot of money right there. I mean, what, $10,000 approximately per student, or is it more than that we've lost to all these districts surrounding us?
Well, we're losing enrollment, no question about it, and it breaks down to around 10,000 a student. Not all of that is tied to enrollment. It's a little bit less than that maybe as far as what's directly tied to enrollment, but it's a significant amount of money.
Yes.
And we've lost, we're down to 8,100 students now as of June. And of course, we started, when Mr. Dixon stepped into town, we had 10,770. And the Red Plan projected us to stabilize at 9,600. So clearly, we're 1,500 students below Red Plan projections. We could fill up Lakewood Elementary 6 times with that. And of course, it just has a devastating effect on the budget. And we have to do things to get more competitive in the marketplace. No question about it, in the educational marketplace, despite all the money we've spent. And we've run up a bill with bond interest on facilities alone of $481 million. And we're still not competitive in the marketplace. So clearly, we have to find money, and we have to direct it where it needs to go to make us more competitive in the marketplace. And I think we have to get on it fairly quickly here. And we are circling the drain to some degree with this kind of enrollment loss.
I think another part of the problem that I saw is, okay, when you're cutting the amount of money that's going into the classroom because we have a deficit, you're taking away very necessary support staff from the teachers who need these aides in the classroom. The classes are still overcrowded, and that was a promise by the Red Plan to eliminate the overcrowding. I hope I'm not using the wrong word there. I'm going to use that right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but at least diminish the overcrowding. That is continually going on, and some of that problem for the teacher is too many students and students then not getting the attention they need, and those parents, and I talked to one, he was a loan officer, and he explained the situation with his son, and that child is now up in Proctor. He wasn't getting what he needed. The kid was struggling. And so do you feel that the money that we are losing in the situation where we need that extra staff is critically necessary to replace that money so that we can put on more staff and help these teachers that are struggling?
Absolutely. I mean, you hit it right on. I mean, that's definitely one of the things. And the thing about grant writing is you can write a grant for a specific need, and I would really target some of that support staff so that we can get the aid that the teachers need in the classrooms. No question about it. But there's a lot of other things that are causing it, not just the enrollment loss. We also, the Red Plan, you're not supposed to bring it up even. No one even wants to talk about it, but it has failed in every aspect of its financing and every single one of its projections. That's a massive failure of a huge investment, and of course it has blowback on your budget in many ways. I mean, we did sign contracts here that had nothing in it to protect us in regard to the fact that it was supposed to be essentially half free, already paid for through savings. We're supposed to have huge efficiency savings pouring in the programming simultaneous with bond payment, and that was supposed to create an educational Shangri-La here. And it just simply never happened. It never happened. If you look at the review and comment, it was supposed to ultimately close the achievement gap. We're supposed to have millions of dollars pouring into programming right now to close the achievement gap. That never happened. And we're also still pulling a lot of money out of the general fund to pay for buildings. And again, the savings are supposed to be covering that, but the savings were, to put it bluntly, just hyperbolic nonsense from day one, and we got nothing in the contract to back any of it up. So here we sit with a promise that has gone south, and of course it's having blowback on the budget in many ways, and we have to deal with that reality that we've gotten into.
Well, I think by ignoring the fact that the red plan was a problem, we are ignoring the problem overall. We're trying to cover up and be nice people and just simply kumbaya, everything's going to be fine. And that's not reality as far as I'm concerned. And I know a lot of people out there. How many people do I hear them say, sell the schools to the competition, they're already there. And they're not going to go away. They're eventually going to find a place where they are going to bring in more of the children, take away more of the children from the current schools, the high schools, the junior high. And I know that from what I've spoken to people that the elementary grades are overcrowded, and yet there are some schools where there aren't enough kids, so they don't even want to shift the kids around because it might offend some parents in the eastern section of the city. So, I mean, I see some of those problems as well. How do you feel about the administration allowing those types of problems to happen and not just taking command of the situation and say, this is what we're going to do because it's best for the children, and you will just have to learn to accept that decision that I've made?
Well, you pointed out a real problem. First of all, again, I'm not here to bash the red plan. You know, it's done, and we have to deal with that reality. You know, but you know, it's a fact that we have incredible problems with these schools that were supposed to be right-sized and perfectly located for generations into the future. We're only, some of these schools are only, 4 or 5 years old, and we're already in big trouble. I mean, Congdon is overflowing.
Right.
After this year, they say they just don't know what they're going to do. It's stuffed, and Lakewood is at the same time under enrollment. It just doesn't have the enrollment it needs to function right out there. Only had a halftime principal. I don't know if it's halftime at this point or not. But, and obviously the same thing is out in the west. Some of the schools, 600 fewer students in Denfeld, and Lincoln Park is only about half capacity. It's a $50 million building. But, it is, look, in fairness to administration, it's a difficult problem because we have such a competitive marketplace. You can't just lower the boom. This isn't 1892 anymore where you only have, people have nowhere else to go. And so you have to be careful about just saying this is what we're going to do and that's it, because people are just going to pack up and go somewhere else if you treat them too roughly. So I believe that we have to go to the public and get more public input about what the people will accept, but we're going to have to deal with this problem, and you're absolutely correct. You cannot solve a problem without first admitting it and getting an honest assessment of it. And I do believe that is one of the problems in the boardroom and the people that control the board, the DFL principally. The DFL endorsed, they've had the dominant, and at times domineering voice in that room for years. And as a group, let's face it, they've had control, and they are the ones who gift wrap this for Duluth, and they have some incentive to just kind of dodge around that big red elephant in the room. And I do think that is one of the reasons that they're spinning their wheels and stuck in a rut. You have to deal with what you've gotten into at some point and admit it. You're absolutely correct about that.
Well, I know like in the Lakewood school, many of those children are enrolled in the, excuse me a minute, it's Lake County School, and that's over on the Ryan Road. Yeah. It's a charter school, and many of the students, because that Lakewood Township and Normanna Township, Genesee and Rice Lake City of, many of those kids would be at Lakewood School, but they have chosen to go to the charter school, which is quite a ways away for some of them, especially on the west side.
Yeah.
So that charter school is always full. They have to take first come, first serve, and then put you on a list in case some people drop out. So they're always full over there.
You're right.
And those kids eventually go up into the high school in Two Harbors.
Well,
They don't come back to the Duluth School District, and the parents are willing to take them up there, or the buses are willing to take them up there. So
Right.
that's a problem with Lakewood School.
Right.
I understand that it's not totally full out at Stoll School either, because many of those children are going to Renshaw.
Yeah. Well, it's just a persistent problem, particularly in the West, because the proximity to the other districts, because of the geographical location of the Western schools. We do have them coming literally into the district to pick up the kids there.
The buses are coming
Yeah,
in from
right.
Proctor,
Right.
and Renshaw is coming in, picking them up.
It's stunning to me that we made an investment of this magnitude and it just actually backfired and it increased the competitor's position in the marketplace. That is just an amazing failure of a huge investment, and we just simply have to admit that and adjust to it. But everybody knows human nature. I mean, if something's big and ugly and complicated, everybody kind of tends to want to dodge around it, But I also know that if you face into something, almost invariably, it's less tough than you thought it was going to be, and it can be quite empowering when you do, when you face into it and deal with it. I do think that there's some things that we can do here with a more proactive board, and I think we can salvage a lot out of this yet. But we simply need a change up in the boardroom. We need a change in the boardroom. They're stuck in a rut. And, they keep talking about moving forward.
I've heard it.
My opponents, again, from the DFL for at large, we're moving forward, we're going to be positive. They haven't yet said anything specific about the job, but, they're going to move forward. You can't move forward, you have to move forward, and I don't want to use the word ignorance, but you have to move forward from a point of knowledge, and the future is based on the past, and I just don't.
Exactly.
I don't believe you can just come in there and not know anything about what happened, have no idea what's been going on for 12 years, and lead us forward. I think that's the great fallacy that we've been fed by the DFL.
Well, and hiding your head in the sand is not. That's that kumbaya that, everything is going to be fine and just vote for me and I'm going to make all the difference in the world. And we have heard these two promises way too many times, and it's not working. I like I said, I saw that for many years, 8.25 years, and I just kind of got a little tired. But I'm glad that you've stuck on the issue. You've written well for it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the DFL influence. I understand that the Duluth Federation of Teachers Union invites the candidates in to interview them, and you had an experience, I believe it was Tuesday, August 8th, at the Union Hall. I've heard from 2 other candidates. Could you just tell me a little bit about your experience and what you observed there?
Well, first of all, I didn't ask for their endorsement, and I told them straight out. I had done it 3 times. I learned after a while 3 times. I'm not going to get it in a 4th time. I said it's been the same pattern every time. Whoever gets DFL endorsed is going to get DFT endorsed, and it's all a pre-rigged game. It's sort of a dog and pony show, frankly, and of course that's exactly what happened again. So I told them, I'm here because, labor is the most important part of any organization, and the teachers union is the most important. And I don't want to diminish any of the other bargaining units, but the teachers union is really central to the operation of the district, and they deserve respect. And I said, and I told him, in this political climate, I've lost 3 times, but I think only a fool would bet against anyone winning in this political climate. And if I do win, I want to make sure I keep open communication lines, and that's why I'm here, to show respect and speak to you. They're always nice. We went through all the sessions, but some people did raise a concern about one thing that happened there, and that was the fact that the superintendent's wife was sitting with the union, and some people thought that was inappropriate. And I will tell you that it did put a little bit of censoring on me. I was, she was in there with one of the union people in one of the sessions, and she and the other union person brought up the labor management arrangement of the district and wanted to get my views on that. And I tempered that a bit, because I thought to myself, I'm not going to have this conversation with the superintendent's wife in the union hall. It just didn't seem appropriate. It did seem to be somewhat of a conflict of interest. I mean, obviously the superintendent is the chief administrative officer. And also, as Harry Welty, board member Welty said, the board is essentially management. So it just twists everything up to have her sitting there too, and questioning, especially that question. And I didn't want to bring up the contracts particularly. They're signed. We've signed 4 years worth of contracts now, 2 2-year contracts. I do think that those contracts were a bad deal, especially in the out years. They're going to exacerbate the deficit problem that we have. Benefits particularly, I think, are just out of line with the realities of the budget. I would have liked to have that conversation, but under the circumstances, I did not want to have that conversation with the superintendent's wife, and I thought it was, again, inappropriate for her to be in that position.
Well, and I've recently written a letter that I'm seeking approval by someone before I go forward with it. But as an elected official, and that's on the Soil and Water Board here in Duluth, and then as a former elected official in the township, if my husband came to offer services to the township, I could not vote on whether they accepted his proposal or not. I had to recuse myself. As a soil and water elected official, I feel the same way. If someone's contract comes for monies from the district, and I know those people, or they're a relative, I recuse myself from voting on that. It's an ethical, I think it's an issue of ethics.
Well, you're right, and we're not talking about anybody voting on anything, and I don't want to exaggerate the situation. And all the teachers, they all draw their money too. That really, to me, that wasn't really the conflict. The conflict was she was the superintendent's wife, and in my opinion, it was I just thought it was inappropriate. If I had been in that position, I would not have had my spouse come in there and ask that particular question of the candidates. I just thought it put them in an awkward position, and it was inappropriate. And I've seen that sort of inappropriateness before in the district, and I do think it's worth raising that issue.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's an ethical issue, is what I'm getting at. It's ethics here that we're dealing with. I was just using my examples. Right.
I don't like to throw the word of ethics around. It makes me think that I'm on a higher moral ground or whatever, and I don't want to put myself there. But I do think it showed poor judgment, and there's been a lot of poor judgment over the years in those kinds of relationships. But I also want to point out that there's just a lot of union activism in this DFL ticket. I mean, it is incredible. And during the initial introduction with the union, the first district rep, Rosie Lofter-Kemp, board member Rosie Lofter-Kemp, said, I don't think you can be too union to be on the school board. And she said, I've been told that I'm too concerned about the unions, and she said, I don't think you can be too union to be on the school board. I disagree with that. I just disagree with that premise. I think, again, I respect unions. I'm not anti-union. They're going to paint me that way, but it's not true. I've had union cards, and I respect labor. And again, anybody with any sense at all knows that labor is the most important part of any organization. You have to have a good relation with labor. But I don't think it should be your primary constituency, and sometimes I think it is for the DFL. Really, I think that, labor is exerting a lot of force, and, I've got some quotes here from Minnesota Education, or Education Minnesota, I meant to say. That's the umbrella group for the NEA and the AFT, the National Education Association,
Okay.
and the American Federation of Teachers. They have an umbrella group, and they're really getting quite active now. This is some quotes from their newsletter in Fergus Falls and Wilmer and other places in Minnesota, and it says Fergus Falls was one of many local unions who got involved with their local school board or levy elections in 2016. With the help of Education Minnesota, both for resources and financial support, many local unions saw successes. And I do think that they're getting more and more active and aggressive in stacking school boards with union people. And the school board is not supposed to be a union hall. It's not supposed to be a union hall. It's supposed to represent the public and the public's interest. And it's supposed to, again, ostensibly anyway, it's supposed to be in control of the finances. And it's supposed to be a check and balance. It's not just supposed to be in there sort of a adjunct PTA or the Auxiliary Employee Association, a union hall, just looking out for the people that work in the buildings. They have a right to have a respected place at the table. But that should not be your primary constituency. And this slate of DFLers, they're just going around, DFL endorsed candidates, I meant to say. They are really going around talking about how they have to cheerlead for the unions. They've been very, very active in support of the unions. That in and of itself is not evil, but I think that you have to be careful that doesn't take over everything and actually affect policy. And I do think that the unions have had an active part in play in policy. They've been actively affecting policy. One of the reasons that we did not sell these properties, one of the primary reasons, is because the teachers union came out so strong against those sales. And they put a lot of pressure on the DFL. And again, those two organizations are married. There's no light between them. And, they're talking about, protecting the district by not selling those properties. In effect, I think they were protecting the union. And look at these bad deals. You look at Rockridge, for example. And when we had nearly $1 million offer on Rockridge, and we could have just taken that money and just think what we could have done with $1 million. But instead, they refused to sell the Many Rivers Montessori, which was effectively a daycare. Most of their enrollment is 3 years old or younger, just toddlers, really not much of a competitor. So they refused to take nearly $1 million. And then they said, well, we're going to move the Woodland Hills kids into Rockridge. So instead of taking $1 million, now we have to put millions into Rockridge to fix it up. We had to literally borrow from the maintenance fund, which is already pathetically underfunded, to protect this huge investment we made in facilities, and they're rating that to put millions of dollars to fix up Rockridge. And so what happens? Woodland Hills was in our old Cobb School, that they bought from us in the 90s, and they're going to turn around and sell Cobb School to Many Rivers. So Many Rivers is still in the marketplace. They're still going to be in one of our old schools. And what a loser deal for us. It's a great deal for Woodland Hills, but once again, our board was just not savvy in getting a good deal for us. We lose a lot of money in that whole transaction. We could easily took $1 million, and we're losing millions instead. And we gain nothing as far as protecting us against a competitor. I just think it's just, we made some bad moves. And part of it is because of the union's effect on the policies and the implementation of policy by the board.
Well, it's my understanding, according to my source, that we're going to put about $22 million into the Rockridge School, and then we're going to be paying and paying and paying for the maintenance on that building, because it's
I don't know where you got those numbers, but no, it's not $22 million. No, It's
2 million, I'm sorry, did I say 22?
Yeah, 22
I'm sorry,
million, yeah.
2 million. It's 2 million that is going to be pumped in there.
No, it's around 3 right off the bat here.
Oh,
Plus we have to, within 2 years or so, we're going to have to put a roof on it too. It's already slated, so that's another $1.5 million or so. So right now we're looking at about $4.5 million total.
Okay,
and
I'm sorry.
And it's going to be, and probably end up being more than that. That's just the bare bones right now. But yes, we've lost that. And again, we had to raid the $3 million. We've had to raid from the maintenance fund. We had to bond against the maintenance fund for that money. And that was, again, just terrible fiscal management. From the beginning, I've been trying to point out the fact that they claimed that we needed the red plan because we didn't maintain our buildings. And then they were raiding the maintenance fund. They didn't have any, they had no sense about how they were going to set us up to make sure that didn't happen again. And I said, you're making all the buildings new or like new. How do you even schedule it out? You're going to get hit with a huge wave of maintenance, and they just were not focused on it at all. So we only had a $2 million levy as it was going into the maintenance. And most of that 10-year plan was being sucked into Old Central. We had $17 million that was going to be pumped into Old Central. So we were already in a position where we only had about $600,000 for maintenance for each of those other buildings in the 10-year plan. And now they've raided it again so that they can put the money into Rockridge. We're just down to nothing. And what people should be aware of is that's another non-voter approved levy power that the board has. And they're already talking about levying the public to try to make up that difference, because they're supposed to be at over $5 million a year invested according to state standards for the investment we made, and we were only at $2 million as it was before they raided it, and most of it was going into the renovations on Old Central, which incidentally had been thrown over the side of the boat during the red plan. So all those expenses, the thing about maintenance, the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. And so we're in a situation where Old Central is getting pretty dilapidated and needs a lot of money, and we don't have any money for this huge investment we made to protect it. It's been terrible fiscal management, really the worst I've ever seen firsthand. And I think that's why we need a change in that boardroom.
I can't disagree with you. The other thing that I think we need to mention here about Rockridge is now that the entity that's moving in there doesn't own the building, we do.
Right.
We will continually have to put money into it.
Right.
So it could be out to 22 million before we know it, simply because there's going to have to be ongoing maintenance,
right,
where we wouldn't have had to do that when they owned their own building.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I said, the 4 million or so, if you count the roof, $4.5 million, that's just bare bones. And we're going to have now, for a building we could have gotten rid of and got $1 million. Now we've got the maintenance, and we have to provide the food service in there, and we have a lot of expenses in that. We do get some lease money, but it's never going to cover, not going to cover all the other additional expenses. No way.
No.
So it's going to be a loss for us, no question about it. And another bad deal.
It's one of many, and like you say, without a change on the board, that has some insight. But when you've got the collusion between the unions in a nonpartisan, this is supposed to be a nonpartisan race, so the DFL collusion with the unions is totally, to me, obnoxious, simply because nonpartisan means nonpartisan. Let the stated parties stay out of it and stop making decisions and passing it through to your board members that they will vote the way you want them to vote when it comes down to making these decisions.
Well, you can point it to a problem in politics with just too much vested interest, period. And sometimes the public just gets shunted to the side. And one of the things that has bothered me for years is no one seems to ever talk about the public here. I mean, the public, the levy's gone up by $19 million. Since Keith Dixon came to town, it was $13 million. It jumped to $32 million. And what have we gotten for that investment? Most of that has been non-voter approved. They did not even give us a say on this. And from the beginning, there's been this kind of callous disregard for the public. And if you ask me what I bring to the table, it's one of the things I do bring to the table is, there is a division in the city yet. This is the 8th time I've been out in 9 years knocking on doors. And I'm still running into it almost exactly the same as I ever have. They've failed they failed to reach out to the people that feel disenfranchised. They just haven't made much progress. And one thing I bring to the table is I have a lot of credibility right where they don't. You know, I have a lot of trust. People know I'm going to hang tough on what I believe, and they trust me. That very part of the community that they've been unable to reach. And I do believe I can be a liaison to that segment of the community, and they'll believe me. And one thing that I want to do is I want open meetings. I want to open up the agenda meetings. Those should not be secret, closed meetings. It's outrageous in my opinion. I shouldn't say outrageous, but I do think it's been inappropriate. They have meetings where only the chair and the clerk are allowed to go behind closed doors, and they've, of course, both been DFL endorsed forever. And all the other public's representatives are barred from their own agenda meetings, and the room is filled with administration. That's just completely inappropriate. It's not transparent government, and it's not fair government, because if you've won a majority of a certain part of this community's vote, you have a right to represent your constituents' concerns, and you need appropriate information to make those judgment calls, you know?
Yes.
And it's not fair that these meetings are held behind closed doors, and I do believe that's why we've had so many bad decisions and gotten so many bad outcomes. You get better government with transparency, and they, from the beginning, they've been trying to elbow everybody else out. And it is absolutely a fact that some people on the board do not have the same access to information as other members, and that is completely inappropriate and unfair. And it creates a lot of stress in the room. One of the reasons we've had so much stress in that boardroom is because of the fact that there's like two tiers in there. The DFL endorsed, they have sort of special privileges, and I just don't think it. I think it's caused not only a lot of stress, but I do think it's also it's undermined good decision making, because you need all the voices. When I said this in front of the city council a while back, I said one thing that we should have learned from the Red Plan is respect for dissent. I said you get the positivity train rolling down the tracks, full speed ahead with no brakes on, even when brimming with good intentions, can lead to a train wreck in a railroad job. That's what we should have learned here, that we need some dissenting voices. We need some more opinions in there to kind of temper, the DFL, as we all know, we got to love them. They keep us busy. They're graspers, they're big thinkers sometimes, and they like to take moonshots. And sometimes their moonshots, like the Red Plan, fall far short of the moon, and it certainly did here. And I just think you need some tempering voices loud in the process, and by not having those meetings open, you do elbow everyone out. And Gary Glass said that after he got off the board, that one thing you do is you prevent your colleagues from giving you their best ideas. You create this little insular bubble, and you elbow everyone else out. And I do think that causes worse decisions and bad outcomes often. You do need dissent in democracy. It has a proper place in democracy, and that's been undervalued here for a long time, since Keith Dixon came to town, frankly.
Well, having been a member of the township board, in all the training and whatnot that I've been in, I also visited other townships and their meetings and whatnot. And I think one of the reasons Rice Lake was so successful and eventually becoming a city is because they were very open. They had a agenda-setting meeting open to the public 1 week before the board.
Right. Well, the city council does that too.
And why very good point that you've made, that this should be done for the school district as well, and invite the public to come in and find out what's going on.
Let the public see it. And I will tell you one thing further. If I had won last time, I think we would have had the votes to do that. It shows you how important an election is. If I had won, we would have sat down and had some real conversations with Edison and some of these other entities around property sales, and we most likely would have sold property. It shows you just how important election is sometimes. We would have had a 4-3 vote in the other way. Many things would have changed if I had won instead of my opponent. And I like my opponent. My opponent in the last election, she's not my opponent, but the person who beat me last time, Nora Sandstead, is a good person, and she's smart, and I admire her character. But I do think that, they've had a lock for too long, and if I had won last time, those meetings would be open now. I think I would have had, I'm just one of 7, but I think I would have had the votes to do that, and we could make some changes. And they say they're moving us forward. I say they're holding us back. They're holding us in the status quo. We need to look at new things. We've gotten bad legal advice. We should look at new attorneys. We've gotten bad financial advice. It's time to start looking at some new financial advisors. It's time to take a new view on everything and let some other voices in finally. And that starts with open meetings, without a doubt.
Yeah, it would be certainly very refreshing to see that happen. But I think a challenge for the viewers is take the time to get out and vote. That's your responsibility. You're supposed to get informed. Find the candidate that is most associated with your viewpoint. And then don't forget to go to the polls. Mark it on your calendar. Put it on your cell phone. Make a great big sign on your door so before you go out of the door every day before the election, I'm going to remember to go to the polls and vote. The statistical information that's out there on the percentage of people that honestly utilize the right that you have here in America is overwhelmingly disgusting. When you look at the figures, it's unbelievable.
I'm so glad you brought that up, particularly in the primaries. It's just an embarrassment for our city. The one before last, I think it was 11%, turned out for the primary. And there's so many parts of the world where people would be thrilled to have the right that we're born with, the right to pick their leaders. And people don't even take that little bit of effort to go vote, and they even let you vote early. They make it so simple for you to vote, and that people would blow that off. And then they complain. Well, you can't change anything without exercising that right, and we do need every voice for a functioning democracy. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's so important. It's so frustrating. I do believe we would have made a change in that boardroom. Again, I don't want to beat up on the DFL political machine, but, the fact is they don't have a legitimate majority. They've had a majority of a minority. And if everyone showed up at the polls, I wonder if they could hold on to their majority. I've always wondered if I could just move people to the polls. I go door to door and I get so much support, but then people just blow off the election. And so, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They complain they're not getting good government, then they don't vote. So, of course, you're not going to get good government. And I'm really glad you brought that up because that's just such an important thing. And I hope people will,
Well, and I'm an election judge, Loren, and I have to sit there from, we go in about 6:30 in the morning to set the polls up so that they're open. I think it's 8 o'clock.
I feel your pain. I've been there too. I've been an election judge too.
And I can sit there on primary days and knit or crochet or
spiders
handwork.
are making webs off your arm. Yeah.
I can spend a lot of time doing domestic things, and then you're paying me to sit there and do it when you don't show up at the polls and exercise your right and your statement about other countries. I remember one country, and I don't remember the name of it. It was the first time they had a chance to vote, and they were all just ecstatic over the idea that they got a chance to make a difference. Their voice was finally going to be heard.
I think it was the Iraqi election, the first one, and they were getting their print. Remember that?
Yes,
thumbprint,
that's
they
right.
They were walking around like this. I think that was the one. Yeah. It's really amazing. It is. And other people that just treat it as a joke. You run into the Mickey Mouse. People voting for Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and stuff like that. I'm like, why did you do that? And then we have to sit there overtime and we have to actually count all those. They have to tabulate the Mickey Mouse votes. It's just a waste of time and money, and it's just amazing how some people make it all into a joke, even if they come there. And I just can't get over that. And it's so important. I try to get that across to younger people. I tell them all the time. 20 years goes by so fast, and look what you're going to inherit here. You have to get involved in this because we need better government. We really do. The needs are going to grow, and the resources are going to tighten, and we have to get better use of our resources, and you have to get involved. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Sometimes some generations have a bigger load to carry than others, and it's all setting up for the next generation or two for a big load here on their shoulders, and they have to wake up to that and start getting involved now. And I've just always tried to beg them to not just blow it off. I know it's easy to do when you're young, but 20, 30 years goes by very quickly, and they're going to have this all in their hands yet. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Well, I'm not so sure that point in time isn't already here. It certainly is already here for some of us, especially business owners. We're dealing with excessive amounts of taxes for poor government and promises that have totally failed. So I think that reality is already here for the majority of the...
To some degree, I absolutely agree with you that we are feeling it now, but nothing like we could feel it yet. If that $20 trillion debt starts to go bad, people finally, the whole rest of the world realizes that debt is a bad debt. Things could get a lot worse than they are right now. But as I said before, I think if you get involved, there are things that you can do, and it starts on the local level. I always tell people that. Look in your backyard first and see what you can straighten out there first. And that's where you begin. If you want better government, that's where you start. You got to get involved. You've got to become educated, and you can't just sit in the back seat, and let Daddy drive the car and not look down the road yourself. You're going to have to get involved more. Otherwise, it's going to catch some people here, and they're going to have a rough future. And that's what drives me. Really, I tell people that all the time at the door, and especially when I run into millennials and people of that age bracket. I said, I'm out here because I care about what we're leaving for you, and I want you to have a better world. And I have no dog in this fight in many ways, and I never have. I've never gained anything for myself. I've only suffered losses all these years. But I do believe that, you have a responsibility to try to get engaged and become educated and clearly we're having some issues with government and the functioning of government, and we're having issues with our budgets across the whole country, and we all have to become more engaged citizens. And it does just begin with this very simple, minor inconvenience of voting. I can guarantee you're not going to have a huge line if you go there with the primary, and just please.
Well, I don't believe I've ever experienced a line in the primaries.
No, again, I don't know why we're laughing in a way. It's embarrassing, really, for the city. It's embarrassing for our society.
It's sad. It's very sad.
I agree.
It's
totally.
not hilarious. It's sad, and sometimes we laugh at sadness, sad situations.
Yeah, it's an escape valve. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, right.
Well, now, Loren, are there any issues in particular that would be good for you to just briefly, we just have a few more minutes here, just to briefly sum up what you'd like the public to hear other than what we've discussed?
Well, look, I just don't think that we should turn this into an adversarial situation as politics has been turned into. But I do want people to understand. I said this to the editorial board of the News Tribune as well when I met with them. I said, look, there's a divide in this city. There's a divide in the country. There's a divide, everywhere. Everybody knows it. The question is whether or not we can work across the divide. And the other side of the Great Divide has maintained over and over again that they're the ones that can heal that divide, and everybody's going to follow them. But I think we should question that in this election cycle. I really do. I mean, they have a track record. There hasn't been another majority for a long time, and we can look at their track record, and I think it's lacking. I mean, look at what they've gotten us into. I mean, they've run up a $22 million annual debt. And they structured that debt, not only that it clobbered the taxpayers, but they're pulling money, millions out of the general fund, out of the classrooms to pay for buildings. They blew a $30 million reserve fund. They had it down a few years ago, down to $780,000. We had $30 million reserve when Keith Dixon stepped into town. And they blew that whole fund. It didn't go into the classrooms. And also, they jacked the levy by $19 million. And they're still broke. I mean, they're so broke they had to raid the maintenance fund. I mean, you know, there's a track record here, and it's about time, I think, for everyone to take a look at it and see, you know, how they've been led and who's been leading them, and I think it's time for a change.
Well, I don't disagree with you, and the ultimate disaster that I see is the effect on our students.
Ultimately, it is about education, exactly.
And
Yes.
well, I shouldn't say we. The district used those children, used them in front of the cameras to plead with you to give them the money that was needed to get them out of the problem. And it didn't work. It hasn't changed a thing. And yet many of these kids are leaving our city, going to other schools to get an education, or they finally are done with school and they haven't graduated. They've passed them through. They haven't graduated, as that one young man said from Denfeld, my old alma mater, which just made me cringe. He's got a diploma that says he graduated, but he is not educated. And these are a problem. This isn't one student. This is many, many students.
No,
and this is prison. Yeah. This is education to prison pipestone. And that is just gut-wrenching for me to think that these kids are not qualified to get more than a menial job. And sometimes they can't even hold that job because they're so poorly qualified.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you the voter, has a choice to make. You need to make a decision based on good information, and you need to go out and do your duty when it comes time for the elections coming up in September, the primary, and then the general election in November. And so, Loren, I want to thank you for coming in and explaining much of what you've seen, and I hope that the people will listen and heed. And just thank you for all that you've done. And you've been a stalwart, fighting warrior, and I appreciate that you've done that.
Yeah, and thanks so much. And then thanks so much for bringing it back to the children at the end. You know, I mean, they did use the children. They constantly said it was all for the children. And it ultimately is about education. And I don't think you can get good education without, you know, getting better government. That's why I've always focused on the government, because that will translate into better education. And it is ultimately, of course, about education. And we've got kids coming in Denfeld with 5th and 6th grade level reading and math skills after spending all this kind of money, this kind of investment. That's unacceptable performance.
Totally unacceptable.
You know, so thanks so much for ending it that way.
Well, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for viewing. Have a great day.
You bet.